In today's video, I will be lighting things on fire and destroying my carpet. So that I can save you lots of time and money if you ever attempt to actually complete a full Warhammer army. I've been in this hobby for 30 years. I've worked in a Games Workshop store, played in tournaments, painted professionally, run a YouTube channel, and assembled and painted hundreds, if not thousands, of models. And if my entire house burnt down and I had to start again tomorrow, here is every cheat, hack, and time saver I have learned to start again from zero. Anyway, timestamps in the description. Let's hobby hack. What to buy? In short, whatever excites you enough to put together, paint, and use. However, beware that collecting Warhammer 40,000 as a poor person is much more expensive than collecting Warhammer 40,000 as a rich person. That's because if you have access to ready money, you can buy the large boxes of models that contain an inbuilt discount. If I were in line for a new army, I'd find a combat patrol box that I like the look of and buy a couple of them. Those boxes contain a discount of between 20 to 40% on buying the kit separately, and of course, if you buy them from a discount retailer like Element Games, you're going to get at least a 15% discount on top of that as well. Honestly, just choose one you like the look of and don't worry about game balance. That will resolve itself. Most of these boxes contain around 400 points of models, so 2 will really help form the core of an army. Buy some other kit you like the look of and bingo, you've got 1000 points. This is a great start. If Space Marines are your faction, and statistically they will be due to their popularity, you will have a huge amount of options to pick from here at a massive combined discount. Plus, you include the kit from whatever version of the main game, currently Leviathan, plus the Christmas battle forces, and you can quickly and easily build up an army in no time. However, if you don't fancy investing in large-scale purchases, don't worry. If you are canny, you can still save huge amounts of money. How to get cheap Warhammer, hack number 1. If you want a single model or 2, you can search the Hatchet Partworks site for an individual issue of the Combat Patrol magazine. Occasionally, you end up paying an extremely cheap price for an otherwise expensive sprue of models. The full magazine subscription will get you a larger discount, but you will get a wide variety of models, paints, brushes, and scenery, except it'll be delivered over the course of 3 years. How to get cheap Warhammer, hack number 2. If you are even more canny, you can take advantage of Games Workshop's new release battle forces. Essentially, every time there is a new codex release, there will be a large box around that usually clocks in at around £150 or $240. These boxes will have a decent selection of models and possibly even the new codex as well. The Champions of Slaanesh, Space Wolves army set, the Blood Angels army set, Dark Angels Deathwing Assault, and the Kroot Hunting Pack are all examples of limited release sets, and you wouldn't be in a bad place if you just bought a couple of these and sold the duplicate parts on eBay. Fun fact, the duplicate parts in these cases will most likely be the new characters and limited edition books that will command a high price for a short period of time, so you win again. How to get cheap Warhammer, hack number 3. The yearly Christmas battle boxes are usually the biggest discounts going. However, they do sell out fast, but don't worry, I have a trick for that. First of all, find your local Warhammer store on the store finder page. Give them a call on the few days before the release to register your interest and ask for the best way to ensure you get hold of one. Turn up waiting outside the store at 9:45 on the Saturday morning of the pre-order. Make sure you have your My Warhammer account username and password to hand. Pop into the store ahead of time. Use the store portal to get logged in. Add the pre-release item to your cart and then just refresh the page at 10 AM and check out. The reason for doing this is that these store portals queue jump the waiting list on the main Warhammer website. If there is a queue in store or other holdups, you might even be able to reserve the stock directly from the store owner if that store has been allocated any. You just can't try this trick with a discount retailer. They don't get queuing preference, and sometimes they get a very small amount of stock reserved for them. How to get cheap Warhammer, hack number 4. Games Workshop's made-to-order releases are sometimes incredible value, particularly if they offer large amounts of models in one go. To give you an example, the collection of an old Farseer and 5 Warlocks was £36. Meanwhile, a box of 2 plastic Warlocks is currently £38. Orders can take 8 to 12 weeks to ship, as they will just cast them based on requirements, but if you don't mind the scale or material differences, you can go to town. Also, because they don't sell out and you can buy them in store, you can combine this hack with hacks number 7 and 8 on this list. How to get cheap Warhammer hack number 5. Don't collect Space Marines. You see, some of the cheapest deals for armies can be gained only once every 3 years at a particular time. Every new edition of Warhammer 40,000 will consist of a big box with a load of miniatures in for a fantastic discount. However, most players only want that box set for the Space Marine half, which means they will try and sell whatever the other army is. eBay will slowly fill up with people trying to undercut each other in order to try and get rid of, for example, the Tyranid part of Leviathan, the Necron part of Indomitus, or the Death Guard part of Dark Imperium. 3 to 4 weeks after the main release, the market will be saturated and you can pick up a fantastic deal on multiple copies of this set. Furthermore, I'll guarantee you that as soon as the edition cycles out, those models will rocket up in price when the meta eventually shifts, even if they might not be particularly powerful or in demand at the moment. How to get cheap Warhammer hack number 6. You can also sort through marketplaces like Facebook Marketplace, Troll Trader and eBay to get a bargain on a second-hand army, but to me, that's like buying second-hand underwear. How to get cheap Warhammer hack number 7. If you go into a physical store, you can pick up and put together that month's miniature of the month, which, while sometimes is a random Warcry ganger, is sometimes an incredibly useful single miniature like a Fire Dragon or a Space Wolves Bloodclaw that really helps to give you extra options in a squad if you don't need the squad leader. Plus, you can also just use these models to practice your painting. How to get cheap Warhammer hack number 8. Also, don't forget that currently for every £60 you spend in a Games Workshop store, you get a limited edition collectible coin or other limited edition collectible thing that they give away to customers. By the figures I was given, small stores get 60 coins per month, mid-sized get 90, while large stores get 120. And once they're gone forever. If you see a random stack of stuff on the counter, ask how you can get hold of it. I've occasionally been just handed random collectibles because the store has an excess of them. In addition, most of them will go for around £10 each on eBay. How to get cheap Warhammer hack number 9. Games Workshop occasionally packages up older sprues into small board games like Dawn of War Onslaught, Space Marine the board game, and the Space Marine Adventures series. Although they traditionally sell out fast, they have always been excellent at getting loads of plastic miniatures for a surprisingly cheap price. How to get cheap Warhammer hack number 10. Remember that just because newer boxes exist, the old boxes don't just vanish. So if you search for Combat Patrol OOP, you will find all of the out-of-production Combat Patrol sets, and although some of these have now increased in price, many still contain a decent selection of models, or at least a different selection of models to the current Combat Patrol sets. After you've saved all that money, why not spend some of it on supporting me on Ko-fi? At the highest tiers, my gold subscribers get their name and a unique icon added to every video. Now, back to all the hobby hacks. So these hacks should sort you out with some models in no time. But then, how to build stuff. Your first purchases should be some sprue nippers, something to clean up the parts, and some plastic glue. The best thing for removing parts are a decent pair of sharp, thin sprue cutters. After years of using a cheaper, thicker and blunter pair and struggling with the holes they ripped in the plastic, I upgraded and now would never go back. They are for cleanly snipping the gate that connects the piece to the sprue. You could also invest in some single blade side nippers. They have one side that is a cutting side and the other that is for bracing. Just don't use them to cut through a whole chunk of sprue, and don't use them to try and cut through anything tougher than plastic. You run the risk of damaging them, and even worse, the smaller arm may snap off, possibly into your eye. If you use a hobby knife, there is a chance that you will gouge the model or your hand. Tale of Painters has a great article on which ones are the best. The link is in the description. How to clean parts up. You can choose between a couple of grits of sandpaper or a hobby knife or a dedicated mold line remover tool if that's your thing. I have the motor control to remove mold lines with a knife, but horses for courses. If you are giving this stuff to a child or a prisoner or both, the mold line remover is perfect. If you are going for sandpaper, you will need 2 grits, 400 to 500 grit for sanding down mold lines and 1000 grit for finishing. Sanding sticks are my personal favourite as they are quick and easy to use, but sometimes struggle to get into small areas. If you want a sanding stick, FlexiFile are my favourite, but many companies do alternatives and they should all function equally. How to glue stuff. Next up, to stick the parts together, you will need plastic glue. Don't buy the Games Workshop version, instead buy Revell Contactor Professional Glue. The reason for this is that if it gets blocked up, the metal nozzle can be cleared out using the bristle of an old toothbrush, or if it's too bunged up, wave it over an open flame like a gas stove for a few seconds to clear it out. You can also use thin plastic glue, basically a more liquid concentration where you can press the parts together and then dab the applicator on the join and let surface tension pull the solution in and seal the gap. Any brand will do. Tamiya is great. This stuff can also be used to get into any gaps or hard to reach places, and also can be used to melt away any tricky mold lines, that are the ones that sometimes run through ribbed piping. What about more hobby equipment? If you are on a budget, a sacrificial placemat is better than gouging holes in your desk, although spending the £7 to buy an A3 desk mat from Hobbycraft or Amazon is a worthy upgrade. If you want to drill your gun barrels, you will need a pin vise mini drill. Any make will do, and they all do the same thing, and one will last you forever. If you are on a budget, in a rush, or don't trust yourself to accurately place all of those holes in the middle of the barrel, use some Nuln oil or another black wash to cover the entire end of the gun. Then the surface tension will help it pull in the middle to give you a decent illusion of a drilled barrel. For gap filling, most modern Games Workshop model kits shouldn't need anything too drastic, but you can take your pick if you want from Milliput, Vallejo plastic putty, or homemade sprue goo. Basically, take some plastic and melt it down with thin plastic glue and use that mixture to fill in any holes or scratches in your models. If you lose the instructions, just find the sprue, start at part number 1 and attach it to part number 2 and continue in order. Or just Google the instructions, someone has probably already uploaded them somewhere already. If you are doing some shopping at this step, get some cheap plastic shot glasses and blue tack. You'll learn why later. How to paint. So after your models are built, it's on to the painting. You know what the most important bit of painting equipment is? Is it an airbrush? Is it a special brand of paint or a brush? No. It's a painting lamp. I run an old hammer painting competition every year, and when people message me asking for advice, the number 1 thing they need the most is nice flat lighting. The number 2 thing people need is coming up later. Give me a basic set of brushes, decades old paint, forbid me from using an airbrush, and I'll paint something really nice using a decent hobby lamp. You can't paint what you can't see, and you can't see the details on these models if you are illuminating them with a standard lamp, even with a single bulb, even with a daylight bulb, even with studio grade quality film daylight bulbs. I know this, I've tried, so don't bother. Why is this? Hotspots. Oh, that went right in my eye. Ooh. Save your money on whatever flashy new paint or brush set everyone is talking about and get a proper painting lamp first. This will eliminate shadows and allow you to see everything nice and evenly. And as a bonus, with a nice flat lighting setup, your photography will get better to match your painting. There is a link in the description with a discussion on lamps. Pick the one you like the look of most. It'll work forever. How to undercoat a model. You'll notice I haven't really specified any brands until this point. If you want to argue about whichever brand of airbrush or paintbrush is the best, go for it. For spraying plastics, Colourforge is currently the best. Citadel are easier to get but more expensive. Tamiya are tiny, Army Painter clog over time, Car Paint is too inconsistent, Montana Gold is for tagging buildings, you aren't Banksy. Just buy Colourforge. If you are planning to paint an army, go find one of these in whatever your main colour will be, and it will blow an airbrush out of the water for speed. Don't spray it directly at the model, instead blue tack the model to the bottom of a cheap plastic shot glass or something so you can hold it, position the spray can about 6 to 8 inches away, and spray short bursts like you're spraying through the model. Don't aim to cover absolutely every single area in paint, you are more likely to end up obscuring the detail. It's better to have too little than too much. Which brushes are best? Brushes and paints are one of those weird, very personal topics where everyone gets a bit defensive and angry about when the discussion comes around to them. Luckily, there is nothing else bad going on in the world these days, so that's where people's anger can go. Technically, you can paint an entire army with 2 quality brushes as long as you keep them in good condition and well maintained. Realistically, my pot brush contains around 30 brushes and the spare drawer contains I don't know how many more. I have Citadel, Da Vinci, Broken Toad, rest in peace, the Army Painter, the rare Heavy Metal brush set, remember that one? Winsor & Newton Series 7, Vallejo, Red Sable, Rosemary & Co, and the Artist Opus Halloween set. You remember that time where you took a size 000 brush and then snipped the end off so that you could use the remainder to dab a perfectly circular round white dot onto eyes? I've got one of those brushes as well. Anyone would assume I have a serious problem, and they would be right on many, many counts. But in my defense, your good brushes will become bad over time, especially from painting metallics, and you also need bad brushes to do tasks you don't want the good brushes to do, like oil washes, base coating, dry brushing bases, and in more times than I care to admit, fixing a bit of chipped paint around the house. If you literally held a gun to my head and told me to reduce the size of this collection, I would, under protest, pick a Artist Opus Series S size 2 or 3 as my good large brush, followed by an Artist Opus Series S size 000 or 00 as my small good brush. I would then pick a large synthetic brush, in this case the Army Painter Monster brush, to do jobs like decant and mix paint. I would then want a chisel tipped synthetic brush, in this case an Army Painter large dry brush, to base coat the textured bases on models, because that job will destroy anything else in short order. And weirdly, I would also pick this, an old beat up Artist Opus size 4 for the gentle dry brushing I do on bases, although because you don't need the point for this job, you could just buy a Rosemary & Co Series 33 size 4 instead. This selection of 5 brushes would work for me. If you paint using a different painting style like slap chop or heavy dry brushing, or you want to use a lot of oil paints, then you would want a different selection. Brushes will get damaged over time, especially if you are using metallic paint, getting paint into the ferrule, or storing them tipped down into the water cup. So as you get more brushes, you relegate your old ones to more damaging tasks rather than binning them. I can tell the argument's starting in the comments now, so before someone says it, although Rosemary & Co and Artist Opus, I believe, come from the same factory, they are manufactured to different specifications. The Artist Opus brush has a less flexible belly, but a more tapered tip, as you can see here. However, if you have a preference on brushes, you go for it. Honestly, there are only about 3 places in the world that produce them, and as long as they use pure Kolinsky sable rather than red sable, you're sorted. All we'll really be arguing about is price, preferred length, and girth. Girth. Which paints are best? Talking about contentious subjects, let's talk about paint. If this was a decade ago, I would be wading through people talking about Citadel versus Vallejo versus Scale Color versus Army Painter and listing the pros and cons of each, and they would be right to do so. These days, the industry has got larger and more money and experience has flowed into the sector. We have professional chemists who are also hobbyists designing miniature paints, so the gap in quality between each brand has narrowed. Paints are also manufactured to a scale that has opacity on one side and blending ability on the other. That means one man's perfectly blended shading is another man's terrible base coat. With new Vallejo model color, Citadel, AK 3rd generation, 2 thin coats, Monument Hobbies, Army Painter War Paints Fanatic, and more down the line that just came out while I was recording this video, I have no idea which range I'd aim for. Luckily, I'm a YouTuber, so I'll just wait until one of the above brands sponsors me, and then that brand will be the best. But what paint to buy? That may not help you if you're starting from nothing, so if that's you, I would honestly just buy either the Warhammer 40,000 Paints Plus Tools set or the Warhammer Age of Sigmar Paints Plus Tool set. That is a controversial take, I know, but allow me to explain. You see, there are a lot of good paints in these sets, and they also contain a pot of those technical texture paints, which I will share my opinion with later. And honestly, 50% of the paints I use these days for painting are Citadel paints. Yes, they are expensive and small, and all the cool kids on the internet use more fashionable brands. But they are easy to buy, everything is always in stock. I don't need to pay for shipping to get hold of a single bottle if I ever run out, which I rarely do because 12 milliliters of heavily concentrated paint will still last you a long time. To put this in context, I've painted tournament-sized armies before with just a single bottle of Citadel paint through an airbrush. Also, there is pretty much no denying that some of those colours are still great. Mephiston Red, Rhinox Hide, the assorted skin tones, Retributor Armour, washed with the new Reichland Flesh Shade is perfect. Rakarth Flesh, those will probably always have a home in my collection. Citadel washes are still best in class for me. These are just better to use in the Citadel pots than dropper bottles. I don't want to decant a wash when I can use one of the little ledges on the inside of the Citadel pots. But are there any upgrades? But there is always a but. I have replaced some of these paint colours with versions that are superior for my usage. Dark Angels Green has been replaced with VMC Model Colour Dark Green. AK Deep Orange has replaced Troll Slayer Orange. The old P3 Cygnar Blue Base and Cygnar Blue Highlight are fantastic blues that look amazing, but you may struggle to get a hold of them. I have no idea if the newer ones match them or if other companies do nicer blues. Lead Belcher and the Citadel Silver Metallics are fine, but I use an airbrush, so I use Vallejo Metal Colour Steel and Silver as well as Model Air Silver to clean up. If you really want to fall down this particular rabbit hole, Tale of Painters has a massive amount of paint reviews for you to consume, as well as many colour palettes for you to look at. Do I need to decant them into dropper bottles? Only if you want to waste a few hours and a lot of paint. There is no one best paint pot. Citadel are easier to use and you can directly control exactly how much paint you get out of them. Dropper bottles are good for airbrushes, but you can't see how much is mixed, and sometimes when you squeeze it you get a big squirt of medium. Plus, it's almost impossible to get the last little bit of paint out of one of them. Also, if they get blocked up, sometimes this happens.
Oh shit.
However, when it comes to Citadel paint pots, what you do need to do is to make sure you shut them correctly. Make sure the back part is shut as well as the front for a full seal. You will need to watch out for the paint dripping into the lid and preventing a full seal of the bottle. If that happens, I use a sculpting tool to pick it out. What products should I avoid? The following products, in my opinion, are gimmicks and should be avoided. Number 1, most airbrush ready paints. Just use normal paint and some medium or flow improver. You don't need a diluted version. Number 2, that quick shade or game wash product where you dip your entire mini in a pot and then leave it to dry. Do you have a shed that you can use this in? If so, the dust in the air will stick to the models while it's drying. Also, the shading part of the process is going to be the quickest bit of painting. See what I have to say about painting later. Number 3, any paint markers. So unless you have motor control issues or you really need to block your miniatures in on the train during a long commute, I would steer clear of these. Number 4, resin bases. They are an absolute pain to work with, almost impossible to magnetize and heavy, so your models will break off from them. Number 5, colour shift paints. If we were painting those Transformers with the holographic stickers, these would be perfect, but because we're not, your army will end up looking like it should be driving around the seafront with a subwoofer in its car boot. But one thing that isn't a gimmick is using a hairdryer. You might think that this is the fastest way to paint, but hold up, because let's put this down, what you actually need is a hairdryer. I can't believe I used to paint a layer on a model and then just wait for the paint to dry. If the paint didn't dry solid before I started the next layer, I would just ruin that section on the model. A portable hairdryer is £10 and you will make that money back in time in your first painting session. Do I need a wet palette? The answer is probably. If you plan on painting for longer than 30 minutes at a time and in a decently heated room, then yes. Get a wet palette or just build one. The budget version is to use a saucer, some water, some kitchen roll and some baking paper. Although the paper will degrade pretty quickly and you don't really want that getting into your mix, it will get you by. The expensive version is the Redgrass Games Everlasting Wet Palette version 2. It's got a better seal and the paper is reusable so you can wipe it clean after use. I would buy this again if it ever broke, which it's frankly unlikely to do. Do I need an airbrush? The answer is no, but it will save you a lot of time, and it'll also cost you a lot of money, a decent amount of money. Let me go through it all. If you are painting a large army or armies plural, then it might be time to get an airbrush and compressor and holder and cleaning equipment and flow improver and all of the rest of the kit. Don't worry about space too much. If you can fit a shoebox onto your desk, you have enough space to use an airbrush. The compressor goes at your feet. As to what airbrush to go for, if you are trying to save money, go for a Harder and Steenbeck Ultra 2023 for £90. This will base coat your armies, varnish them, and providing you mask them correctly, shade them as well. An upgrade pick is the Harder and Steenbeck Evolution 2023 for £140-ish. It is the painting equivalent of an AK-47. The Evolution is so good, it could easily be the only airbrush you ever use. However, if you really want to push the boat out, you can go for a Harder and Steenbeck Infinity 2024 for 250 quid-ish. You can use it to paint and shade almost the entire miniature in the same style as Angel Geraldas in theory. Now, you will find older versions of the Ultra, the Evolution and the Infinity online. These are not as good as the newer versions because I believe they miss the titanium nozzle, but they are still very good. I honestly still use an older Evolution and honestly it's fine. It'll do what you need an airbrush to do 95% of the time. You don't need a needle cap or a lid or a preset handle or in fact a handle at all, as you can see. You just need it to produce a fine constant flow of paint, and this is what the older Evolution does. Other airbrush brands are available like the Iwata Eclipse at £200 or the Micron at £700. A lot of YouTubers have their versions. To be honest, much like paint, if it was made in the last decade, it's going to be fine, but those new Harder and Steenbecks are pretty nice. What else do I need along with my airbrush? You will need a compressor. Any brand will do, just don't try and buy one for under £100 or it's going to be terrible. Airbrush lube. I use Iwata lube. One tub will last you forever. It's about £10. An airbrush cleaning brush set to clean it all up after use. That'll be £5. Vallejo flow improver and maybe Vallejo airbrush thinner. They are £10 each. An airbrush cleaning pot for £12. Masking tape for £3 a roll. Airbrush cleaner, I use Medea because the bottle looks different to those Vallejo ones, so it'll reduce any accidental uses. That's £11. A respirator, that's about £18. And while you are shopping, pick up some matte, satin and gloss Vallejo airbrush varnish. Maybe some AK Ultramatte as well. If that's your thing, those are £10 each. If you can find a bundle deal on this, it would be very useful. You also will need some extra paper towels, a dishcloth for cleaning, and some cling film to augment the masking process. Also, if you are a beginner, book yourself on a course to use it and you'll be brought up to speed in no time, or just pay a friend who has one to come around and teach you how to use it. This will take a couple of hours and it will save you weeks of screwing up and cleaning it and then screwing up and cleaning it again. Now, I understand that airbrushes sound too intimidating or too financially restrictive. If you don't want to use one of them, don't worry, you've got some other options. How to paint without an airbrush. So you can use those coloured primers that I've just talked about and clean up with a regular brush and a hairdryer. Or you could use a paint stippling method to stipple the base colours on. You can use foam brushes, makeup brushes or special ultra-fine dry brushes. Various videos are available on this technique online. I suggest you just try them all out. None of these techniques are exclusive to each other. It will just come down to personal preference. How do I plan out an army? So take it from me, these armies are incredibly intimidating affairs to paint, so the best way to handle the project is to break it up into manageable chunks. I've tried all the speed painting styles: slap chop, zenithal, airbrush highlighting, blocking the colours in and then dipping them in furniture polish. You remember when that was a thing? And every time I finish an army in the quickest way possible, I've ended up hating the end result. So in short, paint the way you like and the way you are happy with the models looking. But you didn't come here for me to pat you on the back and send you on the way. You came here because I'm going to tell you how to cheat. And I cheat at painting very well. So here is how I personally would tackle an army project these days. Paint cheat number 1. Look at these two models I'm showing on the screen right now and tell me which one is more visually interesting to you. Both are painted by heavy metal painters. One is one of the studio's Ultramarines and one is an Iron Raven. I'm going to guess you've picked out the Iron Raven. It's one of Paul Norton's. He is very good at painting. Now I'm going to try a different model with the same picture again with a very small black bar obscuring the main detail and see what you think here. You see, Paul has cleverly concentrated his efforts on parts that will draw the eye. In fact, the base coat of this model was apparently a spray coat of lead belcher and a black wash and nothing else, apart from the varnish to bring the finish all together right at the end. The best bit of this type of scheme is that when he wants to, Paul can give the entire thing a massive glow up, like here with his Terminator squad. Now, I'm not expecting you to paint up to the standards of Paul Norton unless Paul, you are watching. But the point I'm trying to infer is that when army painting, you can save massive amounts of time by just avoiding large chunks of your models that people realistically aren't going to see on the tabletop. If you are planning a colour scheme, always aim for it being lighter rather than darker. The reason for this is that games shops are generally fairly dimly lit, and an army that looks too dark will disappear into the background no matter how well it's painted. And you're going to be sad, especially if you spent loads of time edge highlighting. Aim for a light base colour and then do one layer of shading for most basic troops, and then you can just leave it at that. No need to do any complex edge highlighting on things like saddlebags and ammo holsters. Paint cheat number 2. Concentrate on parts that draw the eye. Here is a Nemesis Dreadnought I painted recently using the Pete the Wargamer's conversion video, and you will see that I've concentrated on the shoulders, the tilting shield, and the weapons. The rest of the model are just metallics that I've pin washed with Basilicanum Grey. Using contrast washes in this way saves you a lot of money versus just drowning the model in contrast paint, as they flow nicely into the recesses and don't mess up your clean base coat. If you've invested in good quality brushes, you can use a really large size one that can hold much more paint than a 000 for this method as well. Paint cheat number 3. To tackle the areas of detail, remember to brace your hands and the model to minimize mistakes and take your time. Go back and forth with the colors to use your hairdryer to speed up the drying time until you are happy with the end result. For army painting, you are looking for a degree of difficulty 5 and an execution of 10. The trouble is, if you do it the other way round, you end up with a disjointed mess that just looks sloppy. Paint cheat number 4. You might not be able to paint a model like the heavy metal painting team, but you can paint your bases like them. Back to Paul Norton's basing again, and you can see that his bases are actually very simple. When it's time to paste your models, you can use Citadel texture paints, but it will get expensive quickly, especially when you have to go back to ensure an even application. My workflow is to superglue large rocks to the base using any superglue. Then I apply a thin layer of PVA glue to the base. You can then sprinkle fine sand or your preferred basing mix over the base. Don't drag it through the box, as it will build up too much sand on the base and give it an uneven look. Give it a light tap and check that you have applied an even layer of sand. You can leave it there, but I prefer to seal this all in with MIG sand and gravel glue applied via pipette. A few drops will diffuse to the entire base. I'm not entirely sure what sand and gravel glue actually is. Maybe some isopropyl alcohol. Someone will let me know in the comments, I'm sure. Whatever it is, it allows me to build up the base layers if I need to without reapplying the PVA, plus it cures rock solid. I usually do this step directly after building so I can leave the bases to cure while the plastic glue is doing its work. After 24 to 48 hours, I just give it a light dusting and prime away. When it comes to painting the base, the website Heavy Archive shows the recipes that the heavy metal team uses. My go-to recipes are either a darker base, which consists of a base coat of VMC Dark Blue Grey or Citadel Eschen Grey, dry brushed with VMC Neutral Grey, or Citadel Dawnstone. I then pick out the larger stones with Citadel Dryad Bark or any dark brown, dry brush the stones with Citadel Karak Stone or VMC Iraqi Sand. Finally, I lightly dry brush everything with Citadel Ashabti Bone or VMC Sand Yellow to tie it all together. I then do the base rims with Citadel Abaddon Black, as it's a bit more hard wearing and satin than VMC Black. For desert bases, I do the same steps again, so Citadel Mournfang Brown or VMC Flat Brown, dry brushed with Citadel Baylor Brown or VMC Scrofulous Brown. I then pick out the rocks in black, dry brush them with Citadel Dawnstone or VMC Neutral Grey, and then finish again with with Citadel Shabby Bone as before. Then finally, you can rim it how you like. Just go to town, like a sailor on shore leave. Painting cheat number 5. Skip painting entirely on this step and just add a load of tufts on your base. Aim for lots of small tufts. I use Gamer's Grass and AK Ultra Realistic Moss, although any 2mm or less scale will be fine. Paint cheat number 6. Clean it up with sandpaper? Basically, when you are painting your base rims, sometimes things get stuck to it. Fingerprints, bits of flock, blobs of paint. It makes the models look messy, but you can fix this by buffing them out with fine grit sandpaper. I am constantly astonished by people who spend hours fixing a tiny face and then mess up the model's massive base rim. Paint cheat number 7. Use lots of transfers. They are really useful in making large areas look really pleasing to the eye, ideally if you have an airbrush and you've managed to get a smooth base coat. The best workflow is to gloss varnish, apply the transfer with a bit of micro set, towel off the excess once you are happy with the placement, then apply micro sol to seal it in place and remove the film. Finally, clean up with a damp brush to remove any residue and when dry, revarnish. Paint cheat number 8. Apply a final varnish layer. Varnishing is really useful to tie all the different parts and different finishes of paint together on a model. I use an airbrush to apply gloss varnish to gaming models as it will hold up against the wear and tear those pieces go through. You can use a rattle can, but it applies a thicker coat to the model which you might not prefer. Just remember, if you are planning to use a finish like ultra matte varnish, it will remove the look of any metallic paint you paint onto the model. Otherwise, just keep the model clean and leave it to cure for 24 to 48 hours and you will be golden. How to store your painted army. So throughout the years I have tried all storage systems from toolboxes, tackle tubs to various iterations of Games Workshop foam army cases, and the system I'm currently using is magnets. The reason why I no longer use foam is because these models have got larger and more dynamic and no longer fit into the confines of a foam rectangle. But magnets? How do they work? Well, you buy a bunch of 10mm by 2 or 3mm circular magnets from your favourite magnet supplier, plus some gel-based superglue from your favourite superglue supplier. Rough up the bottom of the bases using sandpaper or sanding sticks and glue them on. Any polarity, it shouldn't matter. But wait 1 second, if you use superglue on a model and then put it in an environment where the airflow is restricted, you will see frosting or blooming. Basically, the glue particles become airborne, reacting with moisture in the air and then cure onto the area around the glue. This is another reason why I don't advise resin bases, because the model will snap, you will glue it back, stick it back in your pack on the way home, and it will frost up. I have been there and it was not pleasant. As to where the models go after you've glued magnets on them, then you've got choices. You can spend hundreds of pounds on a battle foam Magna rack, a tabletop tyrant box, or an A-case, but for me at the moment, this army lives in a 9-litre really useful box that has had A4 magnetic sheets attached to the top and bottom. It will completely protect it from dust, and the box comes in at under £10. The sheets clock in at £1 a piece. But remember, you do get what you pay for. Here is a stress test of models attached to a Magna rack, and here is a test of models attached to this homemade solution. Several of them did go flying off, and I wouldn't want to try it with any large-scale vehicles or monsters. And there you go, that's an army from conception to the gaming table. If you have any other hobby hacks, leave them below in the comments, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.